This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company, coming at you Thursday afternoon. It's December 7th. Wolves beat the San Antonio Spurs on Wednesday night. It's the Wolves' 15th win in their last 17 games, which is still just wild. Just a wild thought that I need to wrap my head around whenever these things are happening. I've got Britt Robson from Min Post here with me. Britt, how are you?
I'm well.
I do the how are you doing as if we didn't just talk for 30 minutes. Right,
that's all right. I'm good. We were just talking about literally the idea of
being fake
how much you repeat when a team has won 15 out of 17 or lost 15 out of 17, which is far more common in my experience covering the Timberwolves. Then you begin to say, well, how do I start to think about draft picks? Do I think about theoretical trades? And I'm always kind of against that because it's like, what's in front of me is what this team is, and any other thing is kind of extraneous. And so now, when I sat down, to write the column that'll be out tomorrow at Min Post, I had to take like a sampler platter, just take 2 or 3 topics because it's all going to kind of come down to they're really good and they're really playing well. So you try to look for more spicy ways to say it to yourself, and then hopefully that works for the reader.
Yeah, it is, as I'm sure it is for fans who are going to the games or watching the games. Like, it is this different experience of obviously of just winning, but like thinking about the team and thinking forward, because there have been plenty of times. I mean, we've done it plenty of times, 20 games into the season, where we are talking about through a longer lens because it's the most interesting thing. You don't want to talk about how crappy the team is. And now it's like, okay, we do need to be talking about what's in front of us. And we were joking before this of like, how many different ways can you say something's good? Like Finch was asked about, how important has Mike Conley been in the post game press
so good. And he was going to say, what do you want me to say? And he said, pretty damn goddamn important. And the whole room just erupted.
Because it is. It's like, what do we? But at the same time, like, the things that have been good with this team have been relatively consistently good. Which it's like, okay, do we write another column? Do we do another podcast about how good Rudy Gobert's defense has been, or the importance of Mike Conley? And it leads to this, like, everybody's like laughing about Finch's like meat on the bone comment that we like are hand raised. I keep saying that, but the reason I'm talking about those things or thinking about those things is because I'm like, yep, like the Rudy box is like pretty check. Done about 7 podcasts about how awesome he's been defending the rim. And Mike, it's like the interesting thing to me, or why we talk about these things, is I'm trying to figure out things or glean things of what's to come. That's what I've always done when the team was bad. And it's what I'm going to try and do when the team is good. And that was kind of like the ethos of your column too. Like, you closed it with like, there's more gushing than fretting involved in this right now to create a true balance. But it is an interesting time too to think about the meat on the bone, because they are 16-4 and there's meat on the bone.
I also think what is important, what was important to me, like after they beat Boston and Denver, I wrote a column that was just a gush, because I felt in my bones that this is a sustainable thing they're doing right now. Mm-hmm. And so I figured, I debated with myself a little bit about, do I really want to say that at this early juncture? And there's a part of me went, are you kidding? I mean, if you don't say that and it turns out to be sustainable, what are you doing in what you're doing then? I mean, the whole point of this thing, I mean, I used to get criticized constantly for being an early ripper of a team that deserved to be ripped early. So, I mean, to get the flip side of it and to feel like a team deserves to be praised early, get in on the fucking ground floor. But now, I mean, the problem with that is, of course, that we're on like the 17th floor and it's the same story. But that's, you know, it could be worse. I could be crying in my oats about a 200% team rather than a 700% team. So
800. They won 80% of their games. I mean, that again, wrapping our heads around that. Okay, so let's do both, right? Let's do what you did in the column. Let's gush, and let's do small frets.
Okay.
Of what this can be. I think off of last night, the gush you understandably started with was Gobert. And
had to.
How could you not? I mean, they win the 30 minutes he's on the floor by 31. And they lose the 18 minutes he sits by 23 last night, which is actually sets up the perfect gush versus fret sort of thing here. But let's start with Rudy, and let's talk about what was so what he sustained here, right, in an ongoing encouraging manner of just playing his ass off.
What I liked the best about it, the dude is just having so much fun. I mean, he was joyless. He was a pain in the ass to be around. He was like a parent in the locker room, you know. And last year, he was just one of these guys that the stepfather, I always called him. And essentially now he's got the giddiness that, you know, he keeps under wraps a little bit because he's still, you know, he's a 31-year-old guy. But there was a play last night where, you know, Zach Collins drove to the rim, began the third quarter, actually. Zach Collins drove to the rim. Rudy was there to meet him, great verticality, bounced off the rim. Rudy came down and the ball bounced enough that Collins tried to tip it, couldn't, moved out. Rudy chased down the ball after tipping it forward a little bit, grabbed the ball, and almost in one motion just kind of twirled a little behind the back pass to Nah, who's going to bring the ball up, and literally skipped a step or two up the court.
I remember that.
I mean, that behind the back pass and that skip is like,
I'm
no longer in foul trouble. It's the third quarter, and I've only played 12 minutes. I got so much energy. This team is not going to be able to contain me, and I'm going to be Rudy Gobert again. And to have that kind of guy as your teammate on the court, and a night when Ant was clearly rusty, the team wasn't necessarily ready to go out and dig deep. To have like your, you know, defensive cornerstone, aged veteran guy who was the, you know, the albatross of your identity just a year ago, suddenly become like this little Zypher ride, you know, this little is just, it's really good for the team. And it's something that's a pick-me-up. McDaniels is hurt. J-Mac is hurt. All these guys who, whenever they hit the floor, are usually big positives. Ant, Rusty, SloMo in his own way, which we'll talk about in a minute, not fully himself. And yet, 5 wins in a row, you know, that we don't even talk about on those terms anymore, because 15 out of 17 sounds a lot better than 5 in a row, you know?
Yeah. What I've been thinking about with Rudy is this like idea of how you can be so much more consistent defensively than you can be offensively, just as a basketball player, right? There is even the best, you know, offensive basketball players, right? Like you're not going to have your shot sometimes.
Right.
And that's not like it's decently random,
right?
Where you don't have the shot that night. And then your hope, if you are a player who leans more offense than defense, is like, all right, can I affect the game in other ways? Can I get to the line? Can I make small, smart decisions to still be a positive impact player? But it's one of those things where even the great offensive players are going to have, I don't know what the percentage of the time is, but like 20% of the time, just not really have it. in the way that you do. And the interesting thing about defense is there's not this like hot cold element to it. It's like, are you locked in and are you going to do it? And to Rudy Gobert's credit, he is locked in all the time and he does it all the time. And so there's not this like volatility to his performance. And I think that it's that raises the bar of the group. It gives you this consistency. It made Utah a 60-win team all the time because, 75 games a year that he played in, he was a good defender, a great defender so much of the time. And I think that's the impact of Rudy Gobert. And I think that's what we're learning this season. That's what not just us watching the team are seeing, but I think there is a growing appreciation within the locker room of how consistently impactful he is. And that's because it's, in many ways, because it's defense versus offense, which just have different natures to them.
And also the relationship is, it was never an infatuation. The only infatuation there was the front office with Rudy. That was the only place that really went.
Right.
So it wasn't like you have this relationship that is hot at first in terms of it being something that, hey, we're having a lot of fun.
Yep.
It was not. It was mismatched. But everybody knew that they were trying to put kind of colliding talents together, whether it was Cat and Rudy, whether it was Ant and Rudy, whether it was the way they used to play defense the season before with Rudy. There were all kinds of incongruencies. At the same time, nobody denied that if it could be put together, it would be awesome. The question of whether it could be put together. Well, now all of a sudden, or, a month ago, whatever you want to put it at, genuine glimmers that, last season, they were, little tiny embers that people were fanning furiously saying, hey, this has got some heat to it. Now it's like you do have the kindling is caught and the bigger logs are beginning to get, really they're going to burn for a while. And everybody knows this is a cool fire. And this is something that is put together in a way that it's constructed well, it's well insulated, and you have a situation where an elite defensive player is playing that way and is playing with the best defensive supporting cast of his career and is being coached in a manner that is no longer a 9-year coddle. There's no longer like, this is going to be, we're going to do things the way you've done them all the time. He's been challenged and he's responded to the challenge. He in turn has challenged his teammates. Coaches have challenged his teammates. A lot of the bad influences, there weren't all that many, but that to the extent they were here, were gone. You guys, Conley and SloMo, the whole litany we can go through. But at the end of the day, what I want to keep coming back to is joy is such an ingredient that you can never plan for.
Sure.
And you can never, you can hope for it, but it seems like a stupid thing to hope for because it's either going to be there or it isn't.
Sure.
And all of a sudden when it's there, it's magic. And we're looking at magic right now. We're looking at a team that is having so much fun proving that all the social media warriors didn't know what they were talking about. And people like me didn't know what they were talking about, bad-mouthing the ramifications of this deal. And to boot, they understand the path now and they're experiencing the path now. It's just the bundle of goodwill that comes out of that produces joy is how you just continue to win in the clutch, how you continue to win when you're not playing your best. I'm to the point now where I just want to see really good opponents. I want to see how this thing goes,
It's interesting. I want to talk about We won't say what team it was from, but I do want to talk about how we had dinner last night with that scout from another team, because I think this is totally related in that maybe the magical element of this team, unless maybe you need to be watching it every single game,
right,
to appreciate
or have experienced exactly what went wrong and how it affected people last year too.
Yes. Yeah. There's just something to, I think there's going to be a greater appreciation for us covering this team, thinking about it every day, or the fans who are watching and thinking about this team every day. That lets your mind have fewer things to fret about. Right.
Right.
And, it is curious though, that I don't think that perception is around the league. So I want to talk about that, but let's grab our Falling Knife break here first. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. We always plug Falling Knife on these Brit episodes. Britt and I have done a bunch of shows there live before. We love the Falling Knife staff. But what I like even more is the community that they're building there. Britt, we've been talking about how a bunch of people have been going there to watch the games, and it's always something that never, or I guess it made sense to me, but I was like, why is there no anything anywhere that is Wolves in the Minneapolis community? And I think maybe part of it was needed a team to be a little bit better to get people to come out and go see, but they've cultivated that. What, are you going to say something?
Well, I just think that it makes sense to me that people who brew good beer, which requires a certain amount of discernment and taste,
there you go,
and are also good basketball fans. When I talk to, especially the brewer himself,
shout out Tom.
He loves to talk about hoops.
Yeah.
And, one of the reasons they have us there, not only to bring people in, but so that we're around so that they can basically, corner us for a while and talk about hoops. Right. I love that. I mean, I love the idea that this isn't a marketing decision to be a basketball place as like, hey, here's a niche that is unfilled. These guys have season tickets, and
true.
I mean, it's so
it's literally not for them. It is. I mean, it's for the business. Like, that's great, and we're loving that a lot of people are going there and watching the games. But
I mean, and if I was a brewer and I had a bar of that dimension, which I think is also a really good size, it's not, it's not like an old warehouse. And at the same time, it's not like a little shoehorn place with 4 booths,
Sure.
So I think it's the right size. They make good beer. They have a lot of TVs up, and they care about the game. And they'll get to know more people too. I mean, if they're around and they're not too busy, ask some of the people about because they like to talk Wolves, and they're probably watching the games as often as you are, and go there and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, Friday night, Memphis game on the road. Falling Knife Brewing Company. They got projection screens. They got the sound on. They're showing the games. It is the Wolves Bar in Minneapolis. All right, Brett, we talked a little bit before that about how it was on my mind the entirety of the game. We sat down and we had dinner with a scout from team last night, and I think you and I kind of like pride ourselves on the, we are objectively looking at this situation and covering this team, and we're not going to get, we're not going to get so swelled up with, oh, they're great and they're awesome, and we're always trying to do the gush versus fret thing that we're talking about this whole episode.
Right.
But man, did I feel like a fanboy trying to describe to this dude that this Wolves team is really good. It was just, it struck me so much of how deeply skeptical he was about this Wolves team, specifically through the lens of
the playoffs, right?
The playoffs. And as he has many times, scouted and prepared for series. And that's what stood out to me. He's like, I would love to prepare for a series where it's Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert on the floor. Those are things that we can attack. And obviously I've had a little bit of that in my mind for sure. And there's elements of that are real, But it also really struck me the fact of how much of these first 20 games and how great it has been dismissed. And I think that's wrong. Like, I don't think you can just look at what Rudy Gobert has done this season and be like, yeah, that was just, he did that in Utah.
They won 60 games in Utah, and they did this and they did that, and so on and so forth. And I asked them, I mean, who are the best defensive players, aside from Royce O'Neal? And he said Mike Conley. Well, Mike Conley was in Utah, 3 years, and if Mike Conley is your second or third best defensive player, I mean, here, that's just Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, SloMo. You just go down the list, and then you also have the situation in Utah was such that I feel like it was a different experience, and that Rudy is no longer being coddled, and that's nothing against Quinn Snyder. They did go far, and then it just ran out. But I guess what I didn't appreciate about the guy, and part of that is just, there's like 4 or 5 people around there. You can't really get into. If I was going to talk to this guy and try to convince him that he was wrong, I would have needed to have it be more of a one-on-one conversation, or at the very least have the rest of the table come into the wake of what I was about to do, And so I just kind of threw in 2 cents here and there, but there was a part of me, I mean, when he got up to get something, that the friend just said, this team is 15-4, and he's sounding like it's a train wreck, Yep. And it's like, I've ripped this team plenty. I'm
yes, you have,
infamous for it. And so it just felt to me to be smugly naive, which is one of my least favorite combinations.
Yeah, but even if I can separate that, it was just this broad idea that I'm curious of how profound it is across the league. If there's that much skepticism all over the place, again, within the league, scouts, executives, whatever, is that how skeptical they all are about this Wolves team and this 16-4 Wolves start?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, well, but
that'd be fun.
But again, disagreed with him. I know he hasn't watched as much Wolves as I have. Obviously smarter than me, but it's just that element of it seemed to be missing, right? I don't think you can be deeply skeptical about the Minnesota Timberwolves if you've watched all 20 games. I don't.
In addition, what I said was, it's not apples to apples. Rudy's 60-win team and this Wolves team is not an apples to apples comparison. And what he said was, what's apples to apples is that when we all get together and we do our scout, and a 5 or 7 game series or whatever it comes down to, all of our energy goes into, okay, where is a team vulnerable? And we will hit that vulnerability over and over and over again. And that's what we will devote all our energy to. And a team that has Cat and Rudy, essentially, is what he was saying, has those vulnerabilities. And that is an apples to apples comparison. And I just
that was interesting to me. That was interesting to me as I just heard that.
Well, and that's like saying, I guess, that, for example, you attack Luka Doncic's defense. But what if Luka Doncic, made a step that was, also
a profound step that makes it seem like it's less penetrable. And we both think Rudy's made a step that is less penetrable or less likely to.
I just think that, again, it is something you do have to think about in terms of, it is a star-driven league, But there's always been a pushback from me in terms of just being able to say, this matchup you can hammer, this one you cannot, so on and so forth. Yes, that's more true in the playoffs than it is during the regular season, but the playoffs happen at the end of the year for a reason, and it's because a team has proven itself over 82 games in a manner. I mean, that's why Chris Finch didn't want to just do one type of defense 2 years ago. He wanted to expand it. They're doing it now. I mean, they're running zones and switches as well as drops. Rudy's doing more. This Timberwolves team is a team, and for all I know, they could lose in the first round, but it is not going to be because Rudy Gobert still can be easily played off the floor. This guy expects that Rudy Gobert will be benched in the last 5 minutes of most playoff games. That's bullshit. I'm just, well, I really, really hope.
Yeah. And how many times last year? Think about last year, like when there were teams that went once. But what did Finch say throughout the entirety of that time? We are going to live and learn with this. We are not going to take Rudy off. We're not going to take Rudy off.
And the person who complained about it that night was gone in a month. Yeah. And so again, if you want to have a self-fulfilling narrative about this, Rudy Gobert is easily played off the floor in the playoffs because he can't cover in space. Well, if you watch the Timberwolves this year at all, you know that Rudy Gobert's ability to disrupt space beyond the paint, at the very least beyond the restricted arc, which used to be pretty much his home, and one he protected, turf he protected at the expense of trying to venture too far out. And that was the problem last year. And now that's not as much of the problem. So again, it's like saying, that because something has happened over and over again in a certain way, that it's going to happen the same way, despite the fact that a lot of significant things have changed circumstantially, but also a lot of things have changed in terms of the dynamics.
Yeah. So I think it's important to define what Rudy defending in space is. Like, I think the simplistic version is there's two ways that a center has to defend in space. In the action, right? They get the switch and now they have to be guarding a small in space on the ball.
Right.
And Rudy has shown serious growth in that.
Yes.
There is another way to defend in space, and it is off the ball, and it is tracking lateral movement to the perimeter. You're showing and you're recovering, you're moving, and you have a willingness to let go maybe of the rim to defend the perimeter, even when you're not in ball. There's space on the ball and off the ball.
That's the secret sauce that Rudy has found this year, I think.
He is. I would disagree to some extent. I would say he's found the secret sauce on the ball in being able to defend in space on the ball. I think not an A+ off the ball in defending in space. And hold on, let me finish. The Golden State games, and you think about the Dario block, and there's been a handful of that. He has done it situationally. That is defending in space off the ball. The Sacramento game was a game where I think to an extent he got exposed defending in space off the ball, needing to defend laterally at times. And that's because Sacramento's very fast and they move the ball very fast. I'm excited, to your point earlier, to see more games like that, because I don't think there's been a lot of opponents who have done that. I would say off the top of my head, like Sacramento and Atlanta would be two that have that in their game and that ability to stretch them. I just wanted to make that distinction.
And what I would argue there is a couple of things. First of all, Sacramento was extraordinarily hot from outside. I think that if somebody has phenomenal ball movement and has great outside shooters, to your point when you brought it up before, it's not anywhere remotely a consistent ethic. You're going to have, it's a make or miss league. That's when you begin, you know, you get the Houston Rockets that way or whatever, you know, call it whatever you want. That kind of ball can work for a while.
Sure.
But if you have a defense, I think I would argue that what makes the secret sauce this year is that Rudy is not worried that much that his old home by the rim is bereft.
Yeah.
He's got people who are going to be defending there, and he will eventually get back there, but his mind is not half occupied with the annoying notion, and for him back then, a really nettlesome notion that my teammates are letting me down. I'm out here in their territory, and my territory where I make my bones is getting exposed.
Mm-hmm.
That type of mentality is how this thing breaks down. And I think that what has happened this year is that there is a sense of shared turf in the half court that Mike Conley, you see him checking bigs down in the paint. You see Nikhil checking bigs down in the paint. Jaden McDaniels has only played now less than half of the team's games, is an elite on-ball defender. And
it's personnel that can pursue and fight. They have the wings pursue and fight significantly more on this team than they do.
And therefore, you have Rudy Gobert when he's going out to the corner or going out to the slot, is going out there with the purpose of taking care of that man rather than checking that man and hurrying back. I mean, depending on, obviously, each game is going to have different assignments. But I would say I am willing to watch a quality playoff opponent try to play the bigs off the court.
Sure.
This is the entire premise upon which the Wolves have staked their future. I think that I am convinced now that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they are now playing 800 basketball with not only 2, but 3 guys that grew up as centers in the NBA.
Yep.
So if teams think they can beat that, that's why I want to watch the games. And I'm not saying that it's guaranteed, but I'm saying my smugness is built on watching this team play for 20 games. And the scout smugness, from what I could see, is built on Rudy Gobert stone hands, Rudy Gobert washed up, cat, you know, lazy, bitching at the refs, so on and so forth. All these things, there are new dynamics at play here. And when you have locked yourself into a position where you have the best damn defense in the NBA, I think it's incumbent upon the guy who thinks that they're going to throw that defense out in the crunch time of the playoffs to make his case.
Right. I do appreciate the candidness. And it was an interesting thought.
Absolutely. No, in fact, it was, you know, I shook his hand and I said, it was nice talking to you. I would have liked to have been either the 3 of us or me and him or whatever. There was 3 or 4 other guys who were all smart about basketball too. But it's kind of hard to, I mean, as I get older, I don't hijack as many conversations, I hope.
All right, Brett, let's move over to Carl, which I think is I think this segues off of the Rudy conversation and defense and all that sort of stuff. Specific,
not a good night last night.
Yeah. Well, I just want to talk about like the defense with Carl on the floor as the center, or Rudy not on the floor defensively.
Yeah.
Because
that's good.
A great signal of the early season was that the defense was awesome with numerically, right? The defensive rating was really good in like the first 10 games of the season when Rudy was off the floor. There was this, I don't know, red flag, or it was a flag that in those minutes opponents were when Rudy was off the floor and it was Cat and Nas out there or whatever, that they were shooting terrible from three. It was, I remember looking it up at one point, it was like 26, 27% or something like that, which is a pretty significant fly in the ointment. I don't think why the non-Rudy minutes on defense have gotten worse are exclusively like shooting luck coming back. I don't think that's ever really how it works. I think things play into shooting luck too, but it was for sure a factor. And overall, the numbers have changed with the Rudy off the floor minutes. And I think the San Antonio game is a really good example of that, where I don't know what it was exactly, maybe taking the Spurs a little bit lightly, but they were not engaged at the point of attack. And it was a lot of straight line drives right through the heart of the defense over and over again. I mean, the Spurs stink at offense, so they weren't necessarily converting those often, but they kind of beat up on the Wolves still when Rudy picked up his third foul early in the second quarter, and they had to play the whole rest of the second quarter without him. And you go, okay, let's put this back on one of the burners of like, what is the defense going to be like in the non-Rudy minutes? And I was kind of thinking through that this morning a little bit of like, well, we shouldn't have expected the early season defense of that. It's still Cat and Nas, and that's not their main thing, right? To be defensive bigs. But I wonder if when Jaden's back, can you massage the rotations in a way so Jaden's actually out there more often in the non-Rudy minutes? The rim defense is going to be worse when it's Cat or Nas at the rim rather than it's Rudy. So can we address the perimeter defense a little bit more in those sort of ways? Point being, I just think there's ways to make the non-Rudy defense better, but we should note that is rather precipitously dropping.
I agree. I also think that there is an element, they clamp down on defense when they need to at different points. Now, a lot of that when Rudy, last night they didn't because Rudy was pretty much the dominant factor. But if you look at the Cat, SloMo, Nas minutes together, they are still pretty good.
Yeah, but a lot of that did have to do with the beginning of the season, and I would imagine still the three-point shooting numbers of that, three-point shooting against them numbers still for the entire season aren't that good. So I'm saying I don't think we should bank on that. I don't think that's a good stat to be like this. That should give us some security of belief in that group defensively, in my opinion.
All right. Well, and I think that's fair. I think that if you're proposing fixes, I think that one of the...
Well, can we start with, do you think their fixes are needed?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think fixes are needed. I don't think necessarily the front court is where it needs to be fixed, though. I think to your point, I think that how do you play Troy Brown, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, and Shake Milton? That is your quartet of what are supposed to all be two-way wings, And for that matter, if you're going to put Ant back as the primary starter with the bench, that could be another way to do that, although that puts a lot on Ant that you don't necessarily want to do for that particular chore. In answer to your question, I think that Rudy and Jaden really worked well together last year on defense. SloMo and Rudy really worked well together last year on defense. They both now play the three, theoretically anyway, so that you could do some flipping and lean into more SloMo with the starter minutes and more Jaden with the second unit minutes. What that would have the added benefit of doing, the way I would sell it to Jaden, is that gives you a chance to unlock your offense a little bit more because this team...
And I'm not suggesting he comes off the bench or anything.
No, I'm not saying coming off the bench, but at the same time, it does... The players know once they've started and been off the bench back and forth a lot, they know that where the quality minutes are.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing with Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert, then you're in the good seats.
Can I just show you the?
Yeah.
This is Carl Anthony Towns, Kyle Anderson, and Naz Reid all on the floor together. Defensively, teams are only making 27.4% of their threes against that group. And some of that is doing a good job contesting. I get that, but I do think we need to look at like the league average is about 10% higher than that. So that's a factor in why the defense is overall just been a lot better with those guys on the floor. The defensive rating of 104.2, which is an elite number defensively with Kat, Naz, and Kyle on the floor. That is at least in part a factor of teams not making threes against them. I'm not trying to do that. It's the only numbers thing.
No.
And that would even totally.
I think your point is not invalid.
Yeah,
I think that I have never been a person that totally bought into the idea that the most random stat on the board is opposing three-point shooting. Just because I've seen, I mean, for example, the Celtics.
I was going to say that Boston thing. Brad Stevens, who was like 6 years in a row, they have the best three-point defense in the league. So
and it's because they got guys like Derek White and even Malcolm Brogdon, but certainly guys like Derek White and Jaylen Brown and size guys, and obviously Marcus Smart. There is some potential. And that's why I went back to this idea of, I actually do believe that Naz and Kat and SloMo can be a good defensive front court.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying they can't, particularly with the guys who are playing off the bench, like that are playing with those three often are Ant and Nikhil, which are two good options to have on. And I think that's the Celtics-y part of this is you have 5 really long guys out there and your guards are really athletic and you can contest those shots. That's part of why those numbers are down too. I'm not at all saying it's completely
and another reason why those numbers are down. And I know I'm beginning to sounded like a huge Wolves defender when we were just talking about the scout, and now I'm sounding like a huge Wolves defender talking about this. And it just happens to be where I am today. I
You're
guess
just Mr. Positive always.
There you go. But they're turning the ball over a ton right now, and that kills you defense.
Yeah.
And some of that, you'd be surprised at how much of that affects three-point shooting too, though. Open pull-ups and transition usually are pretty accurate.
Sure. Let's move into some of that stuff. You asked Finch, like after the game. Actually, I did get this clip here just about like the nature of these wins.
Yeah. Right.
Against these teams. So I'll just
half
play that
full
clip.
Or half empty, right?
Yeah, let's talk about those after this.
Do you see the last couple of games against teams with losing records, and you guys are obviously on the top of the league right now, not playing with the same kind of unity and intensity you were in the 5-10 games ago, still winning these games? Is that half empty or half full in your view as you watch these things?
I'm probably more of a half empty by nature guy. We got to get better through winning. It's a challenge. It's a sign of maturity. I think tonight a lot of it had to do with rust. I think I will chalk some of it up to that, but that's a team that played extremely well. They're desperate coming in off of a long losing streak, and we knew after a few days they were going to reset and we were going to take their best punch. But we got to be better. I think the turnovers are creeping up. The intensity's got to defensively's got to maintain when Rudy's off the floor, and I think just got to continue to stay in the flow of the offense.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, because I think we're definitely not on the same page a lot.
No, I really like and think it's super important that is the way that Finch is thinking about this.
And
there's this like whole thing, and I've gotten, chastised about it a little bit too, of like with the macro picture of this team of like enjoying the now versus thinking about the later and all that sort of stuff. Like that's just how my mind works,
right?
In this, and probably in the micro now too, where we're talking about the meat on the bone and those sort of things. I think, for the fans, even for the players, the people that are consuming this team, like, hell yeah, like absolutely enjoy this now. I think it's very important that the coach can both enjoy it and be half empty by nature. I think that is going to be a critical element to sustaining this throughout the season, because they peaked early, or like maybe not peaked, but they're at a high level early.
Right.
And the only way to maintain that high level throughout the entirety of the season is with a coach who has that mentality, in my opinion.
A number of things about that. First of all, I agree with more of what you just said than I thought I was going to.
There we go. Good.
And I totally agree with you that anybody who thinks this team is a 66-win team, which is their current pace, is really overestimating. I mean, there's magic here, but I just don't think this is a 66-win team. That's dynasty territory. And that's not where you are, having won, 42 games the year before. The problem I had with Finch in that answer is I thought there were a couple of things. He said they were rusty. He had said like 10 minutes before that they had two of the best practices they've had.
That's a good point. He did say
so, that. Don't chime me on with that stuff. I mean,
well, maybe,
but
let's be
fair.
Okay.
And also the whole thing with the Spurs is this whole idea that we knew they were going to take their best shot. They couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. They did not give you their best shot. They were terrible on offense,
Yeah. I think he did the thing where he's like, he started answering honestly.
And he didn't want to totally screw the team. Right. It's like, what was it? There was some other thing he did when I was I asked him about Cat and shot selection, because he had just got through saying in the pregame that Cat's shot selection, he needs to take a lot of threes. And Cat was 5 for 6 for the night and 2 for 3 from 3. But there were many more times where he drove and either turned the ball over or charged, or charged, because they're turning the ball over and charging the same thing. But he lost the ball as well as losing the ball through charging. Point being, after he said that for a while and said, we want to, in pregame, he said, we shoot from outside. That's the best way for us to be with Cat on the floor. Cat getting up threes. He's the best shooter on the team, one of the best shooters in the league, etc.
One of the dumbest questions I've ever heard in a media session was yesterday when somebody asked him if Cat is the best shooter on the team.
Well, was that a guy, one of those retired newspaper people who parachuted in?
No comment.
I think it was. So anyway.
What are we doing?
My point is that in that particular answer, I enjoyed the part where Finch was saying, we got to do this, we got to do this. And I am thinking of it half empty. What I found interesting was, as he was saying it's half empty, he was basically trying to take it that at the time it was 2/3 empty and kind of make it half empty. Yeah.
I mean, there's water in there, though. There's for sure water. There's a ton of water in there. I just think it's the idea of it is good. And again, to be thinking about this and ways in which that it can sustain. I thought like the three things he listed off in there were the turnovers are creeping back up. The defensive intensity when Rudy's not on the floor isn't there, and we need to stay in the flow of the offense. All right. So we already talked about the defense without Rudy. The turnovers in the Sacramento, Memphis, OKC, and San Antonio games just numerically were really high. That's 4 of the last 6.
Here's what I think about that. I think the turnovers are arrogance. I think that people are beginning to say, hey, we're really good, and I'm going to make a nifty play here. I see
I don't think it's that as much, man. I don't. I think it's I don't think it's trying to do like flashy plays. I think it's a situational like lack of discipline on some passes.
It is it's not flashy so much as not basic.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. All right, we're on the same page.
But I mean, but to skip over a pass, to try to get 2 passes worth of ball movement in one ball movement, that to me is, arrogance to some extent. It's not giving the defense enough credit, and it's also kind of telegraphing where your mind is at.
Sure.
I like to look at a crisp team. Finch calls it clean. I call it crisp. Same definition. He wants to see a clean game, and what by that he means people making quick, accurate decisions. How many times has he praised Nas? Not even so much for the accurate decision making, but for the quick decision making.
Decisive is the word he uses all the time.
And because of that, that is how you get to clean and crisp. Because, and this was another great answer from Finch that I guess I'll get into in a minute. But the idea, when you are decisive and rapid in your decision making, you reveal how much you are in the game. If you make a rapid but not wise decision, then you're not really in tune. And it kind of gets to the point where somebody asked him, how much do you give stars leeway or players leeway? And he went to that line, which I love. This is actually a Finchism that I really like, is 2 things happen with that. They do what they're best at anyway, so you're not leading them to water. They're leading themselves to water, and they're leading them to the place you both want them to drink from. And when they're not doing that, it becomes really obvious because it's doing something they don't do well, and it's easily corrected because they're the ones that initiated it.
That was a great answer. I really like that.
It is a great answer, yeah. And so, and that is why I will tell you that veteran players like him so much, because they understand the logic by what he's doing. And when they go to him to talk veteran talk, like, don't shine me on, I know where I'm at. I know, like, for example, Troy Brown, I know I'm not in the top 8 right now. But, X, Y, and Z, and I'm just checking in. And Finch maybe had said earlier, I haven't forgotten about you. Your time is coming or whatever. He said Taurean Prince said almost the exact same thing 2 years ago and then again last year. And these are the guys that you need. You need to keep your stars happy, and you need to keep your veteran role players whose roles are fluctuating, who know really, really well what a role fluctuation could do to their future. You need to be able to communicate with them in a manner in which they believe you when you talk to them. And that's good coaching. And so, and that's another reason why I think that this magic is going to be more sustainable than people suspect.
Yeah, no, I like it's kind of the general idea of the flow of an offense, right?
Right.
When you're playing in flow, not strict play call sets, but general motion designs, it's more apparent when you're not part of the 5, right? Like if one of the 5 players are not in the flow, it's pretty easy to diagnose on film, right? And as I understood this concept a little bit better, that makes sense to me. I've watched it. I know when that is happening. I did think that was interesting from his answer. Is the one where so he said defensive intensity, why it's a half empty win. They've been half empty wins. The defensive intensity with Rudy not on the floor hasn't been there. The turnovers have been perking up. And he also said, we're not staying in the flow of the offense. That one is more intriguing to me, right? It's less definable. We can't just look at the defensive numbers with Rudy off the floor. We can't just look at the turnover numbers. There's more of a feel to it, or we really need to watch the film to see where it is. I'm curious where you would diagnose the flow of the offense somewhat going away these last few games, and how much of that is just Ant missing 2 of the games and then being a fraction of himself in the last game. what isn't Ant? I guess we know that Ant being out takes away from that, but are there other things that they've started to lose in the offensive flow?
Yeah, I think that injuries and underperformance have thinned the roster of collective capability. I think losing Jade McDaniels, who was playing really well on offense, as he did last year analytically,
sure,
his defensive numbers surprisingly are not that great, but he was becoming really good glue on offense, and he was gone.
I didn't think about that one. That's a good one. That's a good one.
And also, I think that if you remember when they were at that, I regard the Celtic game as the best game of the season in terms of both of those teams, I think, played really well themselves. Went into the locker room thinking we played really well. Celtics felt that way.
Sure. Certainly
their coach felt that way. And the Celtics were undefeated at the time, if I'm not mistaken. So it's, that was a hell of a game. And what I remember about that was the lead was never like more than 6 points throughout the entire game.
Either way. Yeah. Right.
And so what I saw from that was offense against exactly the kind of team that can get out there and contest you on the perimeter, can contest the paint. They had Porzingis. They have all these other guys. The offense was there to do some things collectively. And then there was also times when guys like Conley or SloMo or other initiators said, all right, this is the time to throw the keys to Ant. This is the situation and the time. There are going to be sometimes where you want to play a team flow game. And then there are going to be other times when you're going to want to work an action to get an ISO and then see what happens and work off that. I think that's the kind of mixture when you know when you're doing that and how you're doing that, you are in the flow of the offense. Okay. It doesn't necessarily have to be a 5-person thing, but it does have to be an understanding of, all right, Ant is a good, he's doing one of his little circular dribbles around the nail. We need to be ready on the weak side for either a pass or to crash for the boards. Somebody else needs to be able to get back for floor balance in case he drives. All these things that people are thinking about as they're doing it, knowing what Ant is about to do, that's being in the flow of the offense. Or if you're saying, we're going to run a pick and roll for the weak side corner or the strong side corner, what are the things everybody has to do off that? We're not seeing as much of that kind of collective groupthink and unity as we have in the past. And I think some of that is injuries and underperformance. I think whenever Shake Milton is in the game, everything goes to shit when it comes to offense. I mean, that's just the way it is. I was, of neutral mind, perhaps even leaning positively because I like the idea of the physicality of a guy on the perimeter like that. But he's been horrible. He's been the Bryn Forbes of 23, 24. And, that's a curse I did not want to whisper.
I would more say it's more reminiscent of Culver a few years back.
I'll see you, Bryn Forbes, and raise you, Jared.
Well, I'm raising it because the stakes that he's playing more. Bryn Forbes was bad last year. He didn't play that much.
Well, and now he's headed toward Bryn Forbes territory. He played 12 minutes last night. Minus 18, I think.
It is I feel he seems like a really nice dude.
Good dude.
Like, I'm not trying to do the totally we ripped on him that thing. I think it's just like the hope with him is he's about to leave the rotation. That's pretty clear from Troy Brown was the first sub in the game last night for Ant, and you're getting Jaden and J-Mac back. But just as they've been navigating injuries to Ant, Jaden, and Jordan over these last few weeks, that's going to happen again. And Shake is going to get an opportunity akin to the one that Troy Brown Jr. has gotten.
Absolutely.
So, all right, what can you do? What can he do to come back in and be a role player when that time comes. So that's going to happen. They're not going to go. They're not going to go to Wendell Moore Jr. over him. You know, like he's gonna play again sometime this season. So it's just it seems like it's time for that one to take a break, and I assume it will once Jordan.
Right. Were you being rhetorical when you said what will he come back as? Because I mean, I would answer.
Yeah, no.
I think you have to scrap the idea that he is a playmaker.
Yeah.
And I think that if that happens, and I think everybody knows that now, but Shake Milton, and so Shake Milton has to have that penetrate, and that may take some time on the bench for a while. Just thinking about it.
In his defense, they told him
they pumped him up. I totally
said that. Yeah, they told him to be the.
They basically turned him into a misshapen thing right now, and that was their misjudgment. And Finch was totally in on that, if not the instigator of it. And so
it reminds me of unlocking Rudy post-ups last year, whatever. Like
exactly.
It's one of those ideas. And you know, and Finch has a really good hit rate, obviously, this year and overall in adjustents, but you're going to miss time.
And he also has a transparent track record. I mean, can you imagine parsing Tom Thibodeau's decisions?
Sure.
You know, I mean, you know, we know exactly.
That's a good point. There's
what
we
he
know
is
what
doing.
Feels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that plugging in Troy Brown as almost a Shake figure without the ball handling playmaking, which I hope will go to J-Mac now. He deserves another shot. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had his usual plus 24 net rating when he went down, albeit in tiny minutes. But still, I think that having Shake come back as a clogging defender and somebody who can be the equivalent. So, you know, a lot of teams have a designated scorer off the bench that is potent, not a sixth man, but a guy who can put it in. Doug McDermott last night. I would like to think that Shake could be the kind of player that you put in the game in the second unit and just make him kind of a wing stopper of the second unit.
Okay, I don't know if the McDermott comp hits there.
Because he's such a catch and shoot guy and not on the ball?
Or not a defender? I mean,
No. I'm talking about Shake defending.
Oh.
In other words, a guy
defending a Doug McDermott. Gotcha. Yeah. I was like, I thought you were.
No.
I mean, I'm
Shake
like,
Milton as Doug McDermott. That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is, I think
if
teams
that's true, my Culver comp is wrong.
Teams have guys like in the 7th, 8th, 9th man slots who are really potent scorers.
Yeah.
And a guy who's 6'5", 220 like Shake Milton, who
7'1"
I think
wingspan,
knows how to defend, can get out and snuff those guys. Mm-hmm. I see that as a really good role for him.
Yeah.
And lean into defense. And also, I mean, you're the one that brought this up, and they brought it up when they signed him. He has had a history when he is on a roll and getting minutes of suddenly being very productive.
Yeah.
And so when those things happen, you know, like as Troy Brown is doing now, give him the flowers of his moment and benefit from it. This is kind of what good teams do. Anybody, you know, that's seen a really good team for a while, guys move in and out that have like 2 weeks where they just roll, and it's very important.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's got to be the hope for that. That's the next step, I think, for Shake. Or the next step is probably out of the rotation, but the next positive one is hopefully that opportunity and seizing it. Last thing I want to hit on, you had this in the column too, is Kyle Anderson, and I want to talk about it through the idea of how do you get Kyle back to what he was a season. It's not that he's been bad. He's still been elite defensively. He's been playing offense differently. And this team is like 19th and up. They need to get better at offense, particularly off the bench. And how do they do that with Kyle Anderson now playing the three almost exclusively and not shooting threes anymore? How can you get Kyle to be more of the offensive weapon he was a season ago, in a new role and with a different shot confidence?
I think that's a tough question. I can't answer it, quite frankly, because I don't think anybody knows SloMo better than SloMo. And I already see all the ways he's filling in for his underperformance now. He cannot shoot from beyond the arc. I mean, those shots.
Well, he just isn't. What were the numbers again?
Well, he's 0 for 6 since November 8th from deep.
I don't know which number's more concerning, the 0 or the 6.
Exactly. You know, and it's a month. That's a month. It's a month from tomorrow. Mm-hmm. You know, so I called it a month because my column will be out tomorrow. It worked out really well. But 2 for 16 or something overall.
Yeah.
He's made 2 threes this year.
Right.
He made more than 2 threes in numerous games last year.
Sure.
You know, he shot 41%. This year he's shooting 16.7. And I raised the specter, and I almost hated to open that can of worms, but I want to be true to the column in what I'm talking about with you now. It is inevitable that you have to think about it. He had eye surgery, and he has had trouble with his goggles. He angrily threw them aside during a free throw.
He stopped wearing them, right?
Exactly. And so I think there's probably some eye issues that he's still coping with. I don't have any idea. On the down low, I've been told by people that SloMo does not want to talk about it. And when you talk to Finch about SloMo, he just says, get out of here. He's great. Leave me alone. Right. And so, you know, it isn't something I could verify. So I didn't want to make it a cause and effect thing. But it's hard to write about it and ignore this aspect of it. So it was kind of this weird dance I had to do. On the other hand, what I am seeing is there's nothing wrong with his court IQ. There is nothing wrong with the way he recognizes defenses and so on and so forth. But his turnovers are up. Why are his turnovers up? I didn't have this in the column, I don't think. I think I left it out. But his turnovers are up, in my opinion, because those used to be open shots that he is no longer taking. He's dribbling in and he's looking for the next pass. And usually
in a condensed shell.
And that's kind of late in the clock. And I think he's trying to do things. His turnover percentage is the highest of his career right now.
Interesting. So for me, I'm not ignoring the eye thing. I'm looking for other explanations because, like you said, I've heard similar thing. Like, I don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know about the eye thing.
And to say it's an eye thing is not fair to him.
So I'm compartmentalizing whatever that thought is.
I think it's wise.
And I'm thinking about what is different this year, right? Or what else could it be? And the one thing is, which is something I came into the season somewhat skeptical about, is moving completely to the 3 versus the 4. We've gone through this before. His most successful seasons throughout his career were the seasons in which he was playing the 4 versus the 3. Not that it's like it couldn't work or whatever, but it is a difference. And
right.
And then additionally, he's been an extremely volatile shooter his whole career in both attempts and makes.
Yep.
He's not, I mean, God, let's just look at the shot. Like,
he's been below 30% 4 of his 10 years from deep.
And the frequency of the threes go up and down too. And that's just
almost all down, quite frankly. I mean, he had 1 year where he shot 3.8 a game, and his next most frequent, I think, is 1.7.
And he got, I mean, it wasn't a huge volume last year, but he got in a rhythm and he got into confidence with it. And they were there in the corners often. Like, that was where he was being asked positioned. He's in the high quad a lot.
Aren't you surprised? I mean, I was shocked when I found out how few threes he shot last year because they were very memorable. I mean, he would hit them.
They came and went too. The volume came and went like week to week or month to month with him too. Like,
that's weird.
It was, I mean,
but never has he gone. I'm maybe his rookie year, his first 2 years. There's no way he's shot 6 free throws. I mean, six threes. Yeah. Sorry, in 13 games over a period of a month. 6 total, and not made a single one. Not only that, but I would bet that over a third of them were not even close to being in the cylinder. They were off. They were clanked. They either missed the back into the rim entirely, or they hit the side of the rim.
I bet you 2 or 3 of them are late shot clock grenades too.
Yeah, it could be, but and that's because he doesn't want to shoot him otherwise.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that's an affirmation of the point there. The great thing is how much the otherwise impact is there. Like the most underrated part of his season last year was the defense. I mean, he's like a defensive effective plus minus. I mean, was like 96th percentile last year. Again, it's the same. The defensive impact measured statistically is the same. So you're not losing anything else there. You're just I think it's gonna be about a repositioning. And I think if he's gonna be playing on the wing with 2 other bigs, I think the best place is on the ball just to get into the action. You know, there was a handful of possessions where he was just the point guard and they're running scripted actions. Like maybe you put the ball in his hands more or as much as you can, at least when he's not on the floor with Conley, just to initiate, because they're going to guard him as a passer. But there just needs, I think, point being, and I'm glad you brought it up in there, there's like, he's a few small tweaks away from, you know, making himself work, and maybe it's a new or work better, and it's a little bit of a newer version of himself. But
context, he's in a contract year.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, that's and this team is squeezed mightily. You don't want to get into it, but Conley is in a contract year. SloMo is in a contract year. If I had to answer right now, I mean, that was
we had that conversation. Which one, if you have to let one of the two go, we're like,
and it was really a toss-up. And Finch loves him so much and loves Conley so much, goddamn important, that it is a really, really hard way to go. And SloMo, you know, it isn't like the first time he's been wanted, but not enough to pay him. And all I can tell you is if he does leave, some team is going to get a great player. Yeah. No, because I mean, he can fit in any group, even if he's not a perfect fit. Does that make sense? Even I think that's exactly right. Yep.
He's like
right good now. Clay.
Yeah. All right. Let's stop there. I do want to mention, I meant to say this off the top of the show, but I didn't. Kyle and I are going to go live on YouTube and do our episode this week, just live after the Grizzlies game on Friday. So game's at 7, probably about 9:30 or whatever. We will be going live and doing a podcast live. We'll take questions and all that sort of thing. So obviously go to youtube.com/@DaneMooreNBA. We'll tweet out links and all that, but be thinking about that if you're watching the Grizzlies game and you want to kind of tap in there, subscribe to that YouTube channel for notifications there as well. I think that's
and then I should hawk something.
Yeah. You have go ahead.
And that is that I'm doing the first Min Post Zoom of the season, the hour before the New Orleans game on Monday.
Yep. Okay.
So in other words, it'll be at 6 p.m. Is free registration at Min Post. Anything you see at Min Post that I send out as a link does not involve you contributing to Min Post. That is always going to be your decision, and it does not involve your participation. If you want to ask a question on the Zoom or just stop by and visit the Zoom and listen in or whatever, or anything, if they have this newsletter thing, if you want to get this newsletter that essentially is my column a little bit early perhaps, and then also maybe some stuff that I normally would have put in back in the old days of length that now, you know, they want to leave out. If I can throw it in to the newsletter, that can happen. There'll be a link for that. There is a link up for that somewhere. All of that is free. And if you like it, then, if you want to donate to MinPost, fine. But again, you're not under any obligation. And, just let's keep this on a level where, I like to be comfortable with the people who want to read and listen to me. And I'm never going to hold you up. Yeah,
no, those are fun. Like, I mean, I'll probably jump in on Monday too and have it up and listening as well. I mean, I promise we are not patronizing you all when we say we think this is an extremely smart fan base. And it absolutely is true. The questions I receive when we do mailbags, or I've heard on there too, is like, you guys the people listening are locked in, right. And they get and understand the game. And I always say, like, 2 years of being terrible, like, killed off all the or 2 decades of being terrible, killed off all the casuals. And like, the only people who were left and sustained were really smart and devoted Wolves followers. And it makes for great, conversation when we get together at the breweries or do these sort of things too. So,
well, my readers have educated me for 30 years. I mean, City Pages used to have a comment section when the online first started. Yeah. I was doing 3-pointers. That comment section created a lot of stuff for me, and more than one commenter turned out to have what back then were called blogs.
Yeah.
And some Nate, who, wound up running Canis, or founding Canis, and Andy and Punch Drunk and a bunch of other people. And there's still people who say, hey, I was an original City Pages guy.
Yeah.
But there's also a whole bunch of new folks that are coming in. And, it's just, if I love to watch the game, I love to talk about the game. And I don't see those two things as mutually exclusive. In fact, I see them as, well, Dane and I are nonstop conversationalists during games. No. Probably more me than you. Sometimes you're busy trying to compute something, but.
Well, you guys just want to break down every single challenge, or like, I'm like, you guys, we're going to figure it out here in 45 seconds. Like, leave me out of this part of the conversation. I'm going to go look at it. We do have great conversation on our very jammed media row where
and inside jokes that are by now like 8 concentric circles deep.
Speaking of Culver. Yeah.
That's right. That's 2 missed free throws.
2 missed free throws.
When somebody Culvers something, it's 2 missed free throws.
And a Derek.
A Derek is a splitting free throw. And then Curry is 2 made free throws, but now we call it Super Curry when nobody touches the rim.
It's really creative, Dave.
But we need to branch that out a little bit more somehow.
Conley,
that's 3 free throws when time has expired. I mean, the only one who's ever done it, to my knowledge.
That's true. All right, check out Britt's column over at MinPost. That'll be up. This is going to actually not be up until Thursday evening. This episode recorded in the afternoon. Britt's column will be up on Friday morning at MinPost. As always, we appreciate you guys listening to all these and reading the writing as well. I, again, will be back with Kyle after the game on Friday. So no Friday afternoon episode with Kyle, just Friday evening after the game. Yeah. And until then, he's Britt. Follow him on Twitter at Britt Robson. He'll tweet out the column. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at DaneMooreNBA _podcast. And until then, peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.